What is God like? God is like a baby. Small, helpless baby that everyone wants to go over and see. Even a poor baby. Well, normally I ask what's God like, and this week it's not really what is God like, it's what is God. Because this is literally true. God wasn't just like a baby, God was a baby. Which obviously is Christmas, as I'm recording this if you're watching it near the time of release. It's Christmas time, the end of Advent, we're coming up to Christmas. The time when we remember Jesus came as a baby to earth. God came as a human being, and not an adult human being, but a baby to earth. And we're going to talk about babies today. Babies are something everyone loves. Well, not quite everyone, but a lot of people coo over babies, love them, they're approachable. You just want to get up to that baby. They're cute, they're lovable, they're small and inconspicuous. They're part of the difficulty of life, raising babies. So God came as a baby. What does this tell us about God? That he's approachable. God came as a baby, as Jesus Christ. You want to just come up to that baby and talk to them. We have this image of God as maybe some old man in the sky with a beard sitting on the clouds, but inherently as him as far away, as not near to us, as something, some being or entity that made the universe and then he just left. He left it be. He's not involved in it. And the fact that God came to earth as Jesus shows us that couldn't be further from the truth. It's true all throughout history that God's been intimately involved in his world, in the affairs of people and in everything that goes on in his creation. But here we see it most clearly, that God actually stepped down into his world. Could it be any more involved? Could God be any more involved in his world? He's not far off. He came near. God is approachable. This baby was poor. He was lowly. We've been explaining the Christmas story to my 2-year-old daughter this year. And she now knows when she sees the baby Jesus, she goes, no bed, no bed, no bed. Because she knows Jesus didn't have a bed to lie down in. He didn't have a proper cot or cradle or anything like that. He was put in a food bowl, as we say, an animal food bowl, a trough with hay and straw in it or whatever. Not straw, with hay. A food trough. Like, it's lowly, it's poor. These people were staying in the room with the animals because there was no room in the main house or in the bedrooms. So basically staying in someone's kind of living room / stable, roughing it. Mary and Joseph probably had no particular good place to sleep either. He came as a poor man. Jesus could have come to earth as a king. He was king, but he came as a lowly king. He could have come in a palace. He could have come on a silver, with a silver spoon in his mouth, on a cushion, and lived a life of luxury. He could have made his life easy, but he didn't. He came to be in our suffering, in our discomfort, in our difficulties. He came to identify with us completely. His parents didn't even have enough money to pay the standard thing to the temple for when the newborn baby is born. Usually you pay a lamb. They didn't have that. They paid 2 doves, which means they were too poor to pay the normal sacrifice for a child being born. Jesus is from Nazareth. Philip asks, can anything good come from Nazareth? After he was in Bethlehem, which is a small town, but not to be despised, but a small town, a small baby in a small town in a small province of the Roman Empire. Jesus is, to all intents and purposes, blink and you'll miss it. But this is the most important thing in human history, the life of Jesus Christ. He's literally approachable. He set a meeting in time and space where human beings could come and see him. That God could be physically approached by those who are alive at the same time. People would literally come to Jesus, they'd walk up to him. I don't know how much more approachable you want God to be. Jesus is literally physically approachable. People can walk up to him, touch him, feel him. Little children do run up to Jesus and cuddle him and stuff. And his disciples want to get them off. He says, no, come, let them come. Jesus eats and drinks with people. You can go watch last week's video if you want to learn more about that. He invites us to his wedding feast to gloriously celebrate with him. But he's inviting people to come and be with him, to physically be with God. The God-man was there among them, and they could go up and speak to him. And because God set a date in time and history, we can know what he's like. We can know him personally as well. There's a lot of good arguments for the classical God, and I believe that the Christian God is a form of the classical God. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, don't worry. There's standard arguments for God that because the universe had a beginning, because the universe, everything that exists must have a cause, because something exists, there must be a first cause. And because the universe contains all material, all matter, and all time and space, that cause must be beyond all matter, beyond all time, and beyond all space. So God must be immaterial and eternal and omnipresent and spaceless. And I completely believe that. So you wouldn't expect to see God in his creation. You would expect to see order and beauty and morals and all these things that we do see. But those are sort of fingerprints. Like you don't see an architect in their work. There's nothing in the building that is like a picture of them. You see the way they do things, but you don't see them in there. Like when you read a book by an author, in the text of the book, it's not, their name isn't in it all the time. It's that they shape how it is. So you wouldn't expect to see God within the universe because he's beyond the universe. He made it. He's outside of it to a large extent. But he came down. He came down from above the heavens where he dwells. When they build the Tower of Babel in Genesis, God has to bend down to even see it. That's how high above everything he is. They thought they were getting into the heavens. They thought they were challenging God. They were no challenge to him. He has to bend down to peer at the affairs of men. But he came down. He came down to earth as a human being. He lowered himself as low as he could to come and be with us. He set a meeting place in time and space, in history, where we can all look back now and examine the historical evidence, examine real documents, real archaeology, that stuff that happened that we understand in our lived experience, and we can come and see God in the flesh. He's ultimately approachable. He became like us. He became like us in every way, which means he could represent us, means he could be our priest. It also means he understands us, so he could be a good priest. That baby, God could have beamed down as an adult. We could have had, a man just suddenly appear. And indeed, in the Old Testament, God does appear like a man several times. We call these theophanies, appearances of God in the Old Testament. But this time he came as a baby to show he was truly human. Not an alien, not an angel, a human. Came from, went through everything that humans go through, went through every stage of life up until he died. He was like us. He was made of meat, flesh, of, bone and sinew, marrow and cerebral fluid. He was covered in blood and amniotic fluid when he came out of Mary. He was a physical thing. He was, you could hold him. He would have weighed a certain amount, 6 pounds or whatever. He was like us. And because of that, he was vulnerable. He was physical. He was able to be injured and harmed. And ultimately, he actually came down because of that. He came down to be harmed, to offer himself as a sacrifice. The trajectory from God coming down from heaven to earth at Christmas keeps going on to Easter. That human being lowered himself to be a sacrifice for us. He kept bowing down in humility out of love for us to offer himself. He's also inconspicuous. He's, blink and you'll miss him. He's tiny. He's this little, how big is a baby? Like this big, that big if they're massive. Fit in your arms. You can hold them on your hand. This is the way God works. He starts small. He started with the nation of Israel in the Old Testament. He says in Deuteronomy 7:7, I didn't choose you because you were the greatest, the most numerous. In fact, you were the least numerous of all the peoples. God says that the nation of Israel was the smallest nation on earth, and that's why, possibly, partly why he chose them. He chooses small things. He chooses insignificant things. When God wanted to make a nation of many people with a land, he chose Abraham, who was a childless nomad. When God wanted to deliver the people, to have a spokesman go talk to Pharaoh, he chose Moses, who couldn't speak well. When God wanted to deliver his people in the time of the judges against fierce, mighty enemies, he chose Gideon, who was hiding. And he kept needing more and more. You know, God always chooses the least likely. And Jesus, although he is God himself, comes in this unlikely form, this inconspicuous form, this form that we don't, you know, you could look at it and think, wait, that's nothing. And people did in his lifetime. They said, I know your parents, you can't be God. But he came as a real human being and as really God. And many people overlook him, and many people don't like the way God does things. God chose a humble, simple, small way to come and save us. And that means if you're proud and if you're puffed up and if you think great, grand things, I'm grand, I will not come to this humble baby, then you'll miss it. It means that the lowly, the poor in spirit come to Jesus. And those who are proud and haughty, they can miss it. Jesus is a miracle baby in a long line of miracle babies. Abraham and Sarah had a child when he was too old and she was barren. Then Jacob is born of Rebecca after she's been barren for many years. Then Rachel has Joseph after she's been barren for many years. And that keeps happening in the Bible. Ruth has a child after she was barren for many years. Hannah has a baby. And then John the Baptist's parents, Zechariah and Elizabeth, were unable to have children. They have a miracle baby. And then we have this miracle baby, Jesus. All children are a wondrous thing. We call every baby's a miracle because it's so wondrous. It makes us see the glory of God when we see a little baby. But it's more than that, because a miracle is a suspension of the natural order. The natural order is wondrous, and so sometimes we call it a miracle. But technically it's not a miracle, because a miracle is the changing of how the things usually work. And Jesus was born of God. He was God's son come to earth. He's the culmination of all those miracle babies. When a miracle baby comes, you know it was God's doing. I have friends who had miracle babies after 9-10 years of infertility. And it's a beautiful thing. You know that that was a gift from God. And here with Jesus, we see this was the ultimate gift from God. The ultimate gift from God was not just to Mary and Joseph, but it was to all of us. Here is the gift God has given himself. That is our gift that we can receive this Christmas. And he's approachable. He's inconspicuous. He seems insignificant. But he is God in person. And we can come and know God when we peer into that cot. We didn't have a cot, did he? Peer into that animal food trough and see a lowly, poor baby, a human being. We can come and know God. Merry Christmas, guys. See you next time.